have this vivid memory of sitting in the bathtub one time and just crying.
I think I punched my dad once.
You're not in charge of me right now. Like, you just won't leave me alone.
I had an epidural in my back, so I couldn't move very well.
She just wanted me to keep pushing and keep going.
Everybody had one. Like, if you didn't have one, you were looked down upon.
This is a show where teenagers share their experiences growing up in today's world. I'm your host, Dr. RJ, and this is A Teen's Perspective. Welcome to A Teen's Perspective, helping parents see the future. I'm your host, Dr. RJ, and I have a great guest for you today. His name is RJ Jakala. Did I say that right?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Now, I do want to say RJ is probably the best name I've ever heard. I'm not biased. So RJ, given the fact that this podcast is really focused on parents, I want you to share with us just a little bit about your upbringing and walk us through your experience in high school, as much as you want to share.
Okay, so my parents are very non-traditional, I'd like to say. We've always searched for like a term to describe them because they're very laxed in the sense they kind of, push us along and give us a general path, but they're very adamant about us exploring on our own and figuring out what we want to do for ourselves. So there was never like anything forced. They encouraged us to pick up hobbies, sports, activities at school, but there's never anything like forced. Like, you need to do this. Some people believe you need to push your kids along like a more academic path. We were sort of on our own. My parents, we're from Chicago, so they're very, they're different in a sense. Like I said, they're very relaxed, so we could do things not as much as our other friends could do. So
give me an example.
Like a curfew, for example. We're allowed to come back whenever. When I was younger, as long as we're staying on our street, we could come back whenever, as long as like some sort of parent knew where we were. Because they trusted us. That was a big factor in our kind of upbringing, was trust. And as soon as we tampered with that trust, that's when, they'd step in and really reinforce it. So I guess you could say they based our kind of childhood on like trust, and you just don't mess with that. They trust us to do what we're supposed to. If we didn't do it, okay, that's on us. They're going to make sure we're aware of that and that, we fix it for next time. But at the end of the day, they made sure that we were independent, we were responsible. So I think it's pretty fortunate in that sense.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I definitely think I'm lucky compared to some of my
I don't
friends.
really see that much at all.
Yeah.
So talk to me about a time where you ruined that trust for a period.
So there was one time, I guess it wasn't trust, just a little bit of, I didn't exactly inform them. So I told you they're very, chilled about where I'm at. They trust me to be safe, to know how to get home. Don't come home at like 2 a.m, be responsible. There was this one time where I was in my neighborhood. There's a community pool, and we went up there for a couple hours where, we're swimming. We're not doing anything wrong. I'm like maybe 11 at the time. But I had my phone with me, but it was on the pool bench. So I was in the pool for a long time. We're playing football in the pool. And so both of my parents had contacted me multiple times. They tried to get a hold of me. I'm not answering. And it went on for a while. I didn't check my phone because it was my friends. I wasn't trying to be rude. So we went to the basketball court. So, it was going on throughout the day that I was gone, and they had no idea where I was at. And it got to the point where I remember I checked my phone. I had like multiple missed calls. I finally called my dad and my mom or whatever, and they were like, yeah, we're just like, like 10 minutes away from calling the police, like gonna report you missing. And, they were like freaking out because this was probably over like 6 hours or so of them trying to find me. They were texting, I had many of my friends' mothers texted me to see, if they could get a hold of me because they were trying to find me as well. My mom sourced everybody she knew. My dad as well, he was freaking out. I don't know if that goes so much for trust. They trusted me to be responsible, and I guess I kind of let them down, not letting them know where I was. But, at the same time, I was safe, and at the end of the day, they were very upset about the whole situation. But they, when I came back, we talked about it. Okay, you're safe. We get it. You're in the pool. So it was kind of resolved, but there was definitely miscommunication.
So no
there.
Punishment, no consequences to it at all?
I don't think I was punished. I don't remember, ever getting grounded. I never got grounded much growing up. I'm not a bad kid. I never did anything. I'm very afraid of my dad. He's my best friend, but I'm very afraid of him. I wouldn't want to upset him. I think the worst thing I ever did was go to the office in elementary school because our teacher told us we couldn't go out to recess, and I was angry, and I said, like, under my breath, I was like, oh, I hate this class. I was in 3rd grade. My teacher heard that, and she thought it was one of my friends who said it, and he, pointed fingers like, oh, no, RJ said that today. All right, pack your stuff, you're going to office. That's type of deal. I never got in trouble for that. I went home, talked to my parents about it. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I was upset. I won't say it again. I was wrong, I never got in trouble. I didn't get grounded much.
That's awesome, man. So you say you're a good kid, and I know I can vouch for that because I do know RJ, and I'm going to share with the audience exactly how I know him. So what do you think contributed to the fact that you pretty much just did the right thing for the most part?
My mom, growing up, my mom was the strict one. So my parents are very opposite, but I happen to believe that that makes them work well together because they kind of balance the other person out. My mom is very, one way, my dad is very the other. So my dad is very more relaxed than my mom. She's very, sturdy on rules. When I was growing up, especially in the younger toddler age, she enforced some serious rules on me. Spankings, hands across the face, you name it, I got it.
Wow.
But I definitely think, it sucked at the time, but I definitely think that kind of shaped me to be the person who I was growing up.
That's good stuff.
So, I definitely know where I'm right, where I'm wrong. My dad taught me how to be a man. Of course, I'm still working on that. I'm 18 years old. But, she kind of taught me the fundamentals of life, the things you need to work on, how you treat people, just like that sort of thing. Of course, sharing as a kid, My mom, she's very involved with kids in her life. So she, have seen the bad outcomes, like the kind of out of control kids. She took that and put her spin on it and then incorporated that in how she brought us up. So she just kind of took what she saw, what was wrong with like the kids she saw, and then, taught us the way she thought it should be. So she just, like what I'm trying to say is, she just enforced a lot of rules early on.
Yeah. And how did you feel about all those rules?
Well, at the time, it kind of sucked. I got punished for a lot of things I thought I didn't do wrong. Of course, I was a little kid. But, looking back on it, I definitely think it's worth it. I feel like I matured more than some of my friends might have, come along with. Overall, I definitely think, after all of that, it was worth it. It definitely helped shape me to who I am now, like I said. And yeah, just overall kind of bettered me as a person.
So whenever you have one parent who's kind of laxed and the other parent very, very strict, how did that shape your relationships with those parents?
I'm sure you can see this coming, but I definitely went to my dad a lot more for certain things. There's a lot of things where if I knew I couldn't necessarily get away with it, my dad, he's very against hypocrites. That's one thing I always thought was kind of interesting. He's like, okay, I did that when I was your age. Go ahead, just be careful. That type of stuff. So there's a lot of things that I could get away with now that I shouldn't be able to get away with that my dad is actually okay with. But since I know kind of what's right from wrong, there's a lot of things I won't do. But to answer your question, yeah, I definitely did go to my dad a lot more for things just because I know my mom would probably shoot it down in a heartbeat. My dad was a lot more logical. He'd think about it, be like, okay, I guess you can, but just be smart, that type of ordeal. My dad was the one I went to for permission, and my mom was the one I went to for help, I guess you could say.
Oh, interesting. So talk to me a little bit about that when you say help.
It's problems at school. My mom was a lot more sympathetic. She helps you out. If you had a problem, she'd make you feel good. That's kind of like a motherly figure for anybody. They comfort you more. But yeah, she always wanted the best interest for me. My mom will go out of her way to make sure I'm happy, which I will always appreciate. So she always, anytime I was upset with something at school or, friends, she was always there to kind of reassure me, offer solutions of how I could better relationship with those people. Whereas my dad was sort of like, my dad's basically my best friend, I guess you could say. I'd go to him for the more of the fun stuff. But my mom, at the end of the day, she was the person I would go to for assistance, like help.
And are your parents together?
Yeah, they are.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Now, siblings.
My sister.
Okay, older, younger?
She's a year older.
Okay, and you think she would say she had the same experience?
For the most part, my mom was there for both of us as like the emotional support. My dad was kind of like the, okay, let's have fun, let's not tell mom type of dad. So yeah, I think she'd probably vouch for me and say similar.
Yeah, so share with the audience one of those times that you can remember where you guys did not tell your mom, but your dad let you guys do something.
First thing that comes to mind is first R-rated movie. It was a horror movie. It was just like a gory horror movie. The only reason why it was R was, language and gore. Very gruesome. I think I saw it was like, I wish I could give you an age, but it's definitely less than 10. I was very young. I should not have seen the movie. My dad told us beforehand, he's like, you guys want to watch a scary movie? My sister, yeah, let's do it. He's like, all right, you cannot tell your mother. He's like, if you promise you won't tell your mother, we'll put it on. Okay, let's do it. And so we watched it, and sure, of course, I was the one who snitched. I didn't mean to. It was very accidental. My mom called us later at night because my mom travels a lot for a living. She's like, oh, what'd you guys do today? I told her the name of the movie. I think it was called The Graveyard, actually. Probably 10 years ago I saw it. And I was like, oh, I watched The Graveyard. She's like, oh, okay, cool. And later on her own, she looked it up and saw, horror movie rated R. My dad gets a phone call, I'm in trouble. So that was, we blew her trust a little bit there, but
yeah, but
it was fun.
It kind of goes to show you that you were a good kid because you were honest. It was hard for you to lie about it. So that brings us to high school. If you could think back to high school, because I know you graduated last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm fresh out of high school.
Yeah, that's perfect. Think back, talk about some of the issues that a teenager has to go through in high school.
So I did go to high school, which was ranked by sophomore year, I believe it was ranked in the top 20 in the nation for academics.
Wow.
In the nation. It is extremely competitive to the point where they actually had to take our school ranking away because it was so skewed. You could have a near perfect GPA and be in the bottom quartile of our class. So it was extremely competitive. Having said that, that causes a lot of anxiety for the students, a lot of stress. Thankfully, I didn't go through it as much just because, I kind of knew where I belonged. My school was very diverse in terms of like ethnicities. It had a very big, Asian and Indian crowd. It was a big demographic for them, and they are very competitive. Their beliefs, you have to be a lot higher up in the chain to be successful. So they were always striving to do their best, and they're very smart. So there's a lot of times where, their system was skewed because a lot of the class was like, happened to be Asian or Indian, and it didn't necessarily work out in my favor. But yeah, so like I said, in their culture, they believe you have to be the best, and that causes a lot of stress, especially in a super competitive school. Whereas if they went somewhere else, they could succeed and be on top of their class, and it wouldn't be as much pressure. But a lot of my friends were Asian or Indian, and they have rough households. They come home with great grades, but they're not perfect, and they're ending up, getting punished for that. They get their phones taken away. The competitiveness was just unbelievable. It was a lot of pressure and a lot of stress to succeed in that school.
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds like anxiety was a big one. What else? Social media is a big thing now. I say now. It's been around for a while, but when I was a high schooler, I didn't have a phone. There was no social media. Yeah. So I can't even imagine the experience you have in high school with social media.
Yeah, there's a social hierarchy for sure. You know your place. You know who's on top of the food chain, I guess you could say. You know where you kind of belong in the system is what I'm getting at. There's definitely a social class, like a chain, how people, jocks, cheerleaders, those type of guys on top, nerds at the bottom. So you just kind of have to find your place in between,
Yeah. So talk to us about high school as far as activities where you consider the jock, the nerd, the guy in the middle.
I had an interesting situation that some people can relate to, I found out later in life, is I knew a lot of people at my high school because I've known them since elementary school, middle school, high school. Most of the people I grew up with, my best friends, were the athletic group that went on to be kind of the jocks. However, I didn't necessarily like the way they were living their lives. They got into some stuff that I wasn't too fond of. So I let them sort of take their own path. Having said that, I could be associated with them. I was friends with them. I knew them. They knew me.
So give me an example, if you don't mind sharing, what are some of the things they were involved in?
Drugs. School, like I said, is very competitive. Stress leads to, they're looking for ways to kind of reduce that stress.
And what is what was the drug of choice?
Well, there's a lot of nicotine products that are kind of booming internationally now. But at the time, weed is very popular. You could go to that school and look through anybody's locker, and I guarantee you they got something on them. Definitely nicotine products, Juuls, vapes. Vapes are very low nicotine. There's variations. There's drops. There's Sorens. There's a million different names.
Wow, I would just say I've heard of vaping. I've heard of weed.
Yeah.
Juuls and some other stuff you were saying. I've literally never heard of that.
It's all the same. They're just different shapes and different nicotine contents. That's what I'm aware of. I know they're different shapes. It's just kind of like a preference. Like, oh, okay, so Juuls are a rectangle. Drops are like an oval, and it just has a little tip at the top. They're different sizes, different shapes.
You smoke both of them.
Yeah, it's like a pen basically.
Oh wow!
It's not like you light it up. It's just like a pen.
Interesting.
And it has very low smoke because it's just like a mist basically. It dissipates very quickly. So these kids, everybody had one. Like if you didn't have one, you were looked down upon. Thankfully, I never got into that stuff, but it's extremely addictive. These kids cannot go without them, and I've had friends where they get very anxious if they don't have theirs with them. Not like a withdrawal, but it's probably as close to that as you can get. They get like shaky. My best friend growing up, best friend for like 8-9 years, he's very into that stuff, unfortunately. I remember in like math once, he's like, dude, I'm shaking. He's like, I don't know what I could do. He's like, my Juuls in my car. He's like, I should go to the bathroom and get it. I was like, dude, you gotta chill out. These kids are addicted.
How do the parents know about this?
Some are aware, and that comes down to parents, whether they care or not, which of course I hope they do. But a lot of them are completely unaware, and it's
so
upsetting.
It doesn't smell, like you can't tell that.
No, it really doesn't smell, and it makes a very, very quiet sound. It sounds like a burning, like boiling water. That's what it sounds like. When you hit it, it sounds like something's burning because there's a coil in there. So it sounds like burning water, and that's all you can tell. The vapor, that's what I'm looking for. There's like a vapor that it produces, but it's so small and it goes away very quickly.
Did you see kids do it at school?
During class, yeah, easily.
In class, no way.
They put them in their sleeves and they have it like this, and they sit in the back of the class like this. It's super easy to get away, and they blow it in their shirts, and it just goes away.
What?
Because the smoke is very minimal, so they just blow it in their shirts.
And the teachers have no idea.
Completely oblivious.
And the kids, they're not laughing and causing a scene.
No, because it's not like, nicotine, it's more of to get the buzz. It's not like weed where you have like different symptoms and you're like, you're giggly, you get the munchies, like that type of thing. Nicotine is more for like how it makes you feel. People like the buzz. I wish I could tell you what that feels like, but I have never experienced that. And people are just, they live for that. Like, these guys are really addicted.
Now, you're sitting in a class and you see someone is doing that. Like, does the whole class know about it?
Yeah, we just, most of the people, So yeah, so you see someone, they got their jewel out, whatever, like either the class doesn't care and they don't want to get involved, or the class is one of the members of that, they have their own jewel. So they're not going to, no one's going to snitch. Nobody wants to do that. That market is huge. I mean, jewel's getting huge backfire for that.
This information is blowing my mind.
I'm surprised you didn't know about this.
I knew about vaping because I do some leadership meetings at some of the high schools around this area. And that's something the principals tell me is like, there are a lot of kids who would do the vape in the restroom. So what they did, they started a hotline so that people can leave the anonymous tip.
Anonymous, yeah.
So no one would know that they were the ones that told on them. They said they've had some success with it, but
nobody wants to be the one to snitch. Even if it's anonymous, you just don't want to get involved. And I totally understand that. But the problem with vaping is it's very low nicotine content. Very low. It's compared to Juuls, one Juul pod, which happens to be about this big. So for the people listening, it's maybe like an inch tall. That the nicotine in one Juul pod is equivalent to an entire pack of cigarettes. Cigarettes, we all know, of course, is terrible. And I have friends who go through multiple Juul pods a day. So these people are smoking multiple cigarettes a day. Now, it doesn't have the smoke that cigarettes do, but it's still the nicotine. So my friends, they have teeth that are going yellow. They're extremely addicted. And it's honestly, it's upsetting.
Yes, very upsetting. And your friends' parents, do they know about it?
My best friend, his mother doesn't really care. She's similar to my parents. She herself has tapped into that market, I guess you could say. So she can't fault her son for it because she is into that stuff herself. And they're by no means like a trashy family. They're very nice people, but she's not going to rip on her son for doing it when she's kind of a fan of it herself.
Interesting.
But, you got to set an example for your kids a little bit.
Yeah, and what about dad? Does dad know?
Not home a lot. But, he's aware. I mean, she's got like a cabinet full of product, I guess you could call it. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy stuff. Like, I can't believe, these parents don't care. And you see on the news now, these kids have holes in their lungs from the Juuls. I don't know if you've seen that.
I saw it with the vaping.
Yeah, kids, they're getting hospitalized. I had a friend, she got hospitalized for like 2 weeks. She was admitted. She went for a week, she got released and got admitted the next week. She couldn't breathe. Her lungs were like backfiring. And she was super into that herself. And then she next day on her story, I saw on her Snapchat, she's like, I'm never doing that again. She's like, anybody who has like this stuff needs to throw it away before it's too late. And it's just wild. Like,
man.
Yeah.
So talk to me about social media and the aspect of just the peer pressure associated with it.
Well, social media definitely nowadays is, like I said, like social classes, that's how you kind of rank people and how you know who to respect, who has authority in your town, your school. It's all based on followers and likes, of course. So kids my age, teenagers mostly use Instagram or Snapchat. Facebook, I hate to say it, but it's kind of for like an older market. My dad's going to punch me for that later. It's definitely for an older market. Kids are a lot more on Instagram, Snapchat, because you can kind of show like, what you're doing and it's a little bit more fun and user friendly. But Instagram, if you don't have a ton of followers, not a lot of likes, you're kind of looked down upon, they're like, oh, okay, it's that person. Like, oh, it's RJ, he's, whatever. If you have more.
So you guys look at each other's likes and that determines.
Definitely. People get as crazy as looking at the likes based on how long it was posted. So they're like, oh, wow, he's got 150 likes. He only posted 30 minutes ago. This guy's popular. As opposed to, oh, he posted 2 days ago. He has 150 likes. So it's scrutinized down to the smallest little things. If you have a ton of followers and you get no likes, oh, you have a fake account. Like this guy's a phony. But if you have, a little bit of followers and you get a ton of likes, oh, this person's really popular,
So how do you get a lot of followers and likes and stuff?
So for me, I wanted to be like a micro influencer for a little bit on Instagram. So I do happen to know a little bit about that. And it's it's an interesting process. So hashtags categorize your posts so people who aren't following you can see them. So, for example, I'm into photography. If I take a portrait of someone, I could do hashtag portrait, hashtag black and white, hashtag photography. And anybody who searches those hashtags, or now Instagram added a feature where you could follow hashtags. So if anybody's following a hashtag that was applied to my post, it'll show up in their feed, regardless of if they're following me or not. So now people who don't know me, who aren't following me, are getting exposed to my content. And if they like it, they can follow me. Boom, that's a follower. And, it stacks. It's a cycle. So in terms of getting followers and stuff, it's shout outs, hashtags, and just putting out good content.
Yeah, but when you say content on Instagram, it's a lot of photos, right?
Yep.
And you're a high schooler. So I'm not sure if you were doing photography in high school.
No, I wasn't.
So how do you get likes if you're a high schooler?
Association, meeting new people. You could go as far as just following everybody your friends are following, and they'll say, oh, okay, Andy's following RJ. Now RJ followed me. I know Andy. Let me follow RJ. So it's just kind of who you're associated with kind of gets put into the bigger picture, and other people. It's like a pyramid, for example. So if I'm at the bottom and I know somebody in the middle, and that person at the top knows the person in the middle who knows me, now they might follow me.
Got it.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. So I kind of want to switch gears. And the reason is because, so I want to share with the audience like how we know each other. So I was RJ's youth group leader at a church. I used to teach middle schoolers, some high schoolers, but mainly middle school. You know, it's a Christian church, non-denominational. And that's how I met RJ. And RJ stood out to me because he has a cool name. But other than the cool name, I mean, he's a good kid. I mean, you could just tell. I mean, any teacher or anyone who's led a group of people, you can kind of tell the good ones. And you know who are the troublemakers. And RJ stood out right away. I knew he was one of the good ones. It made my job easier having RJ there because some of the kids were definitely tough. But RJ, I can always count on him to be the one that's going to listen, be respectful, kind of encourage the other kids to do what's right. So I had an opportunity to spend a couple of weekends with RJ because we did our winter camp, which is a blast. We'll just go out, and I think it's in Giddings, right? It was in Giddings?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like this camp, and I was a leader of about 12, 13 kids, and we'd be all in a little cabin together, and I had to kind of manage all of that over a weekend.
Jeez.
So yeah, it was fun though. It was a lot of fun. But anyway, the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because RJ and I met with the non-denominational church, and we professed our faith to God, believing in Jesus. But as I was setting up for this podcast, RJ landed me with some news out I never guessed.
Yeah.
He shared with me that, well, I'm going to let you tell it. Like, you go ahead and tell your story, because I told him I did not want to get into it because I knew it would be something great for the audience to hear. So I'm going to let RJ just share his story as far as where he's at now and where he was.
Okay, so I come from a religious background. My mother, I could call her a saint if I wanted to. She's very religious, very committed. And since, as long as I can remember, I was baptized at birth. I've gone to church every single Sunday, just knowing that that's what I'm supposed to do. Not necessarily because I chose it, just because that's what I was supposed to do as a part of my weekly routine. And it wasn't until I got older that I started to realize, okay, like, this is actually a thing. Religion is something people worship, they practice. There's a lot of different types, and you kind of have to explore it on your own. Like I said, my parents they focus on us being independent. So even though my mother did bring me up in a church, she wanted me to make the decision on my own. And she's going to respect my decision no matter what I choose. Of course, she wants me to be like a devoted Christian, give my life to God and, be committed to all that. But at the same time, if I chose a different path, she'd respect it. She'd understand and encourage me to still follow her path. But, she wouldn't push it on me. She wouldn't pressure me. As I got older, I started getting away from the church. It became more of a chore to me to go because I wasn't getting out of it what she did, and especially my sister. And, I can't tell you a specific time that I decided it wasn't for me, but I did come to the conclusion that, if I was going to be a Christian, it was going to be on like my own terms when I was ready. I'm 18 years young and I haven't really had that like epiphany yet. But, everybody does talk at church, they had their moment. They weren't Christian for 25 years. And, one day they just had this surreal moment. So, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. But what I did tell RJ is that, even though I was brought up in a church, I'm not a Christian. I guess I'd identify as an atheist. I do believe that based off of, math and science, that something had to mess with atoms to create our Earth and make it habitable, because just based on the numbers, like the math behind it, it's beyond a statistical anomaly. Like there's no way that things lined up the way they did that could happen on its own. So something did have to happen, some sort of higher power. I just haven't discovered what that is yet on my own. I've talked to plenty of people, RJ being one of them. I've been going to the same church for about 10 years, so I know a lot of people in my church. I've had a lot of people try to mentor me and try to kind of crack me a little bit and give me answers. I've been on mission trips in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. I just haven't necessarily found my answers I'm looking for. And yeah, so I guess that's my story. I'm still working on it.
Thanks so much for sharing that with us. You mentioned that you haven't found the answers. So share with the audience some of the answers you're looking for.
Well, I'm similar to a lot of other atheists, I'd like to believe, on the terms that, if there is a higher power, there's a lot of things going on in our world that I believe should be removed. Sickness, horrible deaths. If these things are happening, there's people, dying from starvation in other countries. Like if there really is some sort of higher power, why are they letting this happen? But of course, pastors have, touched on that and tried to address that, but I just haven't found like a good answer. Cancer, for example, millions of people have died to cancer, and there's nothing we can do. You get cancer, you try to fight it as best as you can, but what happens, and that's horrible. If there was a God, an all-loving God, why is this happening? So just, things along the line that natural disasters, things along those lines, that's what kind of irritates my path to Christianity, sets me off a little bit. I've had stuff like that, and I've also had a case where I got treated differently because I wasn't a Christian. And that was a real upsetting time in my life.
How old at this time? How old were you?
When I got treated differently?
Yeah.
Actually, it was very recently. It was a couple months ago. Someone I really cared about, thought I saw something maybe with that person. Her mother didn't approve of me. Her mother.
Oh, so this is like a potential girlfriend.
Yeah,
All
I guess
right,
you could
now
say.
we're getting
Yeah.
into the details here, the juicy details.
Yeah, she was she was awesome. You know, I'm always gonna remember her. That sounds corny, but she's just a really nice, kind girl, and you know, she deserves the best. But her mother found out that I wasn't Christian and made it very clear she only wanted us to be friends. You know, nothing more, because in the Bible they do briefly talk about how Christians need to be dating Christians, and how if a Christian's dating a non-Christian, there will be troubles to come. And you know, I always respected that from her mother. It's her mother. I would never badmouth her mother or talk back. You know, it's her mother. She gets to make the decision. So, you know, I always respected that. But as time went by, we did sort of have feelings for each other. And I did want to move forward and, you know, have a relationship with her and make it like official, I guess you could say. And her mother eventually found out, and, you know, things really hit the fan. Her family kind of got like almost split apart for a little bit because of it, because she was really irritated that her mother was like restricting her life. Her family is kind of all over the place right now. Her mother's very controlling, exact opposites of my parents. It's ridiculous how overpowering her mother is. Her mother knows every move she makes, you know, when she's doing anything. You
Even
know,
now, because how old is she?
she's 18.
Okay.
And her parents she couldn't get her license until about a month ago. She doesn't go to a university. I mean, that's not necessarily her fault. Her family's a little bit lower income, but her parents are making sure she pays for everything. But it got to the point where she kept trying to like argue with her mother about me. And I felt that was a little uncomfortable because I didn't want to get in the way of the relationship. At the same time, her mother was what my parents believed to be like completely out of line. They were not letting her live like at all. She couldn't do anything she wanted. She has 2 little brothers, so she was home every summer, all summer, watching her kid, or not her kids, her brothers, as opposed to like going and hang out with her friends. You know, she just had like a little bit trickier of her life. Yeah, her mother, like I said, was like a helicopter parent, and I was getting in the way of their relationship, and her name was she kind of challenged her mother. You know, things really got shaken up from there to the point where her mom's like, okay, if you want to, you know, still be talking to this guy, you need to pay your phone bill. If you want to see him, you need to pay the car bill, the car payments. And if you're going to go against my rules, you're going to pay to live here. So her mother wanted to charge her rent just so she could still be talking to me. That's when I decided, I was like, okay, that's it. You know, I'm done. But before I was done, I just wanted to have like a down-to-earth conversation with her mother just to try to get a little clarity. Because, you know, through this whole process, I felt kind of bad because I wasn't what her mother wanted me to be. And that now affected her and her family's relationship because she was now arguing with her family. And, you know, that made me feel kind of bad about myself. You know, it's not a good feeling when you're not good enough, you know. And I felt like I could, you know, I'm a pretty decent guy. You know, I don't do any drugs. You know, I got my head set, you know, I go to college, and I got a job. You know, I feel like I could be good for her, but her mother thought differently. So I did have a conversation with her mother, talking to her about this whole Christian, non-Christian dating thing. And it got to the point where she did send me a passage from this Catholic pastor, which I think that passage might have been a little biased in her favor, but it was a passage and also speech. So, you know, I wasn't going to go down easy. I'm very competitive. So I listened to the speech through, you know, front to end, and I read the whole passage. And basically what he says is that if you're a Christian dating a non-Christian, it becomes an issue. You're going to have troubles. You're just going to have troubles down the line, which I agree. That's fair. But they say it becomes an issue and against the word of God when that relationship is prioritized higher than your relationship with God. And they say it's bad because if you're dating a non-Christian, you have different beliefs, and that's going to pull you away from God. So her mother, you know, she had a fair reason, but it's still subjective. You can take it how you want. So the way I saw it is that as long as you're prioritizing correctly, you know, as she still puts God first, which she will, you know, she's very religious and she's very committed and she knows her place, then it's fine. You know, it's fine as long as God comes first. But if it gets to the point where I came before like her going to church and stuff, then that's when it would become a problem. What I tried to explain to her mother is when I first met this girl, the way we'd hang out is I'd take her to my church. She'd come volunteer with me in the kids section. I'd take her to the service. You know, I went to her church a couple times. So I was always making sure she was staying on her path. I never wanted to pull her off just because I believed differently. I would never impose that on her. And I tried to explain that to her mother, and, you know, she didn't really like that answer. But yeah, you know, I think I kind of won the argument a little bit. I told her, you know, at the end of the day, I was respectful. But I did tell her, you know, like, this is subjective. As long as she prioritizes God over me, which she always will, you know, she's very sure about that, then it's fine. And her mother's like, no, you know, like, I thought my daughter was more religious. You know, she's kind of being dramatic at this point. You know, I thought my daughter was more religious, you know, this and that. So yeah, you know, I kind of just cut ties, and you can't win all of them, you know. I tried my best. Just that whole process made me feel like less of a person, but it also really upset my mother because my whole life, my mother, you know, I'm not devoted Christian, my mother has been slowly chiseling away at me. She's trying to get me to convert. Like I said, she's not pressuring, but she's encouraging it. And, she finally felt like she was making some grounds on me. And after having like this whole situation where, now I feel like a horrible person because I'm not a Christian, that doesn't necessarily make me want to be a Christian.
Right.
Like seeing somebody else treat a non-Christian that way does not make me want to associate myself with that type of person. I understand that's not all Christians, but it was a big kind of turnoff. And my mother was really upset with her mother for treating me that way because they both come from the same background. They're both very religious. So my mother was very upset with her mother for treating me that way. And now her mother kind of canceled everything my mom has been working on,
Yeah. And I'm actually glad you brought that up because that's something that actually comes up when I'm coaching teens and I think it's human nature, is that no one wants to feel like they're being forced to do something. So generally when you feel that you're getting forced to do something, you start to become defensive. So like in your situation, you have a supportive mom who's like, hey, I understand that you do not believe, but I would like you to believe, but I support you. But if you have someone coming along saying, hey, you need to be this, or you can't date my daughter, I can see how that would put you back into a position. It's like, well, hey, I don't want to be involved with that anyway. Everything I've found is that the supportive, encouraging is what usually wins over time.
Exactly.
You get to have patience. So this for the parents out there, what I found is if you want your teen to do something, whatever that is, and they don't want to do it, to force it or to be aggressive is pretty much the wrong choice you could make because all that's going to do is create conflict. Showing support, and support is not saying that, hey, I'm glad you're doing this. Support is more so like, I love you, I care about you. No matter what decision you make, I'm going to be here for you. So that's support. And encouraging is like what your mom is doing, just not overbearing, but saying, hey, I would love for you to be a part of this faith and just have patience because it won't generally happen overnight. But like you mentioned earlier, there's people 20 years and say they have that aha moment and come back. And this goes beyond religion. This is anything that parents really want for their child. Just be patient. Patient and support goes a long way. Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. So now we have a few more minutes left in the show. I would love to hear about your future, like your career path, what excites you at this moment. Where is your path leading you?
A big part of what I'd like to do when I get older comes from my dad. He's my role model, my inspiration. He's pretty successful in what he's done. He retired very young, so he's an at-home dad while my mom works. I'm a very business-oriented guy. I'd like to identify as an entrepreneur. I started 2 clothing brands. I sold my first clothing brand after owning it for about a year, and I just recently launched a clothing brand. Didn't exactly go the way I want, but you win some, you lose some. I am currently studying. I'm double majoring in business management and marketing because I believe the two go hand in hand. And it's very universal. You can apply it to a lot of different things in terms of where I want to be when I get older. So, of course, I can't start out and be a millionaire. Everybody wants to get rich right away, but everybody kind of has to tap into a field and start their 9 to 5. Enter the rat race, as Robert Kiyosaki would say. I don't know if you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I would love to work for a tech company in Austin, Texas. Apple has a huge headquarters here. Google, Dell is here. I just actually toured the headquarters in Seattle of Microsoft with the vice president, Matt Booty. He gave us like a VIP tour. My mom knows him from years back. Got a good connection there, so hopefully something can come from that. Shout out to Matt Booty. Anyways, so I'd love to enter the tech world just because it's booming. A lot of those companies are looking for younger, ambitious people. I would love to be one of them. As soon as I get into that, I'm going to roll with that for a little bit, work my way up the chains. I'd love to be in project management, any sort of marketing, sales stuff. I love all that. It excites me. One thing my dad did that I definitely want to pick up on, and I'm kind of shadowing him now, is real estate. My dad owns a lot of properties in Austin that are passive income. So, he sits at home, he does what he wants to do. He works on various stuff, he day trades, and then he just gets a check every month, from his properties. And of course, Austin is appreciating in value, so his properties he bought years ago are now going up in price. So it's like a very passive, great side income, if you will, until you can turn it into like a full-time salary. So my goal is to, be in this 9 to 5, work my way up the chains a little bit, start making money and start investing it. Whether it's in stocks, I can't buy a house right away. So I'd like to invest it into, hopefully tap into the stock market. I'm doing a little bit of that now, ETFs, mutual funds, stuff like that. Eventually get into the real estate kind of world, own my first property that I'm not living in, lease it out to someone to have a tenant, and then start to grow on that. So of course my dad, you don't just start right away. He had his first one, we lived in Chicago. He eventually bought like an apartment complex. So he rented out the rooms, and so from that we went to Austin, and he's got like properties, around the Austin area. And so I'd love to do that. I'd love to work my butt off now and retire young like what he did. So that's the goal.
When it comes to teenagers, coaching is so effective because we use proven techniques that help teens identify goals and develop actionable plans to achieve them. If you're a parent and you want to learn how to use these coaching techniques to coach your own teen, visit us at coachyourteen.com. RJ gave us a lot of insight on vaping in high school. I would love to hear your thoughts on it, so make sure you join our Facebook group. You can find us by searching on Facebook, A Teen's Perspective. There's a lot to discuss about this interview, but what I want to share with parents is how to respond when your teen has beliefs that are different than yours. And although RJ's interview had a lot to do with the religious beliefs, this is the same response no matter what the beliefs are. In fact, in one of my interviews, I had a teen that was mad at her mom because her mom tried to force her to get a flu shot, and she did not share those same beliefs. She didn't believe in vaccines. So when it comes to a difference in beliefs, there's only one response that a parent can have if they want to maintain the relationship, and that is support. And when I say support, I don't mean that you have to agree with their beliefs. But what you do want to make sure is that they know that no matter what, you love them. And that's what I mean by support. With support, it's okay to have healthy discussions about why you believe what you believe. But if you're going to have these discussions, it's important to keep two things in mind. One is that your teen wants to have the discussion. So if you're going to have a discussion with your teen, make sure they want to have the discussion. You do not want to have a discussion when they're playing video games with their friends. That's probably not the best time. And number two, if you want to have a healthy discussion about the differences in beliefs, make sure you are asking more questions than you are making statements. So in other words, you do not want to take over the conversation proving why you are right. You really want to just ask questions, like generally be interested in why they believe what they believe. So if you're a parent and you have a teen that believes something different than you and it bothers you, just know that beliefs can change with time. So all hope is not lost. Just always remember that what's most important is a healthy relationship. Well, I hope this interview will help in some way with the relationship between you and your teen. Thank you for listening, and thank you so much for all of your support. Please review, rate, and subscribe, and share with a friend. Once again, I'm your host, Dr. RJ, and this is A Teen's Perspective.